Good morning from the Greensand Ridge.
Yes, the top of it. The
top part of it. You'll see in a moment the wonderful views that Festus Akinbusoye
yes.
And I. Festus is the newly elected Police and Crime Commissioner for Bedfordshire. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Festus, on your election. Until recently, I was a citizen, a resident of Bedfordshire, and I will acknowledge right at the start, when my wife died, just about 6 months ago, just over, we had known each other very little, but you were just an absolute gent and rock in the support that you offered me at that challenging time. And it was heartfelt on my part. Thank you so much for that.
Oh no,
really appreciate it.
It's fine. It's totally fine. I mean, you know, I having lost my dad some years ago, and knowing what grief is like, and knowing how, I'm sorry to say, permanent it can be, you learn to live with that. But at the same time, you become much more empathetic about what others are going through. So obviously losing a father is not the same as losing a wife, but I think there are some similarities anyway. When you spend so much of your life with someone and they've been a part of everything, and you know, I still can't delete my dad's telephone number from my mobile phone. You know, some
grief
15 years, it's tough.
It's tough, and it stays with you. And you were an absolute rock of support at that time, and I'm really grateful for that. Those that are listening and reading this on Policing Insight will know the backstory, I think, so I won't go into the backstory for the Policing Friendship Tour.
Right.
But here we are in Bedfordshire. And
yes.
Let me just pan the camera around. And so you said to me a few moments ago, for example, there's a testing track.
Over there is the Millbrook testing track. I think there might have been a filming of 1 or 2 episodes of Top Gear there, I think. But you do get quite a few well-masked new vehicles driving around the area, because the Jaguars, the Range Rover, they don't want people to know what the new design is going to be. So they kind of drive around here, but this is a really, really good venue here.
You can look in over the test track there. You've got the panorama here of well, take us through it as we spin around.
Nice. I mean, it's beautiful countryside here in Mid-Beds area. We're in the village of Lidlington, so we're at top of the ridge in the village, and you can actually see Milton Keynes way. I mean, you probably won't be able to see it.
I can't zoom in on this camera, but
at the very far end there, you can see the Escape Dome in Milton Keynes right from the top of this ridge. It's an absolutely gorgeous view, great walk, and we're still catching our breath. We are catching our breath.
We've walked up the hill, and what we're going to do, most unusually on the interviews I record, we're going to stay here, in part because it's a wonderful view, in part because the footpaths away from this are quite steep and slippy. It's been tipping down with rain for the last probably 12 hours, and so the footpaths are boggy. Yes, it's still filming.
Oh, there's nothing showing.
There's a little red light flashing there, which tells me it's still filming.
Hi, we're still filming apparently. Yes.
Don't say anything that you would want to keep off the record. You're fine so far. Bedfordshire Police and Crime Commissioner, now elected, and you will be for the next 3 years. It's a 3-year term rather than a 4-year term.
Yes.
And prior to that, a career in security, running your own, setting up, running up your own business, and in local politics.
Yes.
So now 2 months in.
Yes.
2 months in. How have you found it so far? What surprised you?
You know, the most remarkable thing for me has been the level of support that I felt from my office, who have been absolutely phenomenal. There's a huge amount of things to get your head around, from the national level, dealing with the Home Office, the MOJ and Downing Street nationally, to then dealing with the regional level, where we have a 7-force Eastern regional force arrangement, then to the Tri-Force collaboration partnership, then the local,
Bedfordshire, Cambridgeshire, Hertfordshire, 3 forces.
The Tri-Force, we've got that, and then you have the local stuff, you know, with the local authorities, the councillors, the MPs. So there's a huge amount of managing relationships, and strengthening relationships that's really inherent in this role. But I'm absolutely loving the challenge. Every day I wake up and I can't wait to get into the office and meet people like yourselves and who are passionate about policing and keeping our communities safe.
Lot of stakeholders, a lot. Your electorate runs into a couple of million, several million. I think.
Well, we're close, but we've got about 700,000 people in Bedfordshire, but that's based on the previous census. So we'll wait and see what the next new one's going to be next year. But it's a rapidly growing county with an expanding housing stock. So the challenges, are there, but very much the opportunities as well.
For those less familiar with Bedfordshire, Policing Insight has quite an international readership and viewership now. So Bedfordshire, one of the smaller forces in England and Wales,
yes.
But it has a range of policing challenges, and for example, it also has with Luton an international airport, and
yes.
with Luton the city and Bedford the city, some urban challenges as well.
Yes.
Which brings me on to stop and search, I think, because you've expressed publicly views on stop and search.
Yeah.
Perhaps you'd just like to recap on.
Yeah, I mean, I come from the point of view of someone who has been stopped and searched myself several times by police, 6 times to be precise, from when I was a 19-year-old to now in my 40s. So I have had those experiences of being stopped and searched, and I've got to confess, and I think this is what I wish more officers would appreciate when they do these, when they use this tool, is that it's not the most positive experience that somebody who is innocent would go through in their lives. And the evidence shows that at least 80%, if not more, tend to have nothing to do with what the officers are looking for. But nonetheless, I would like officers to be aware that there's an impact that is left on every single person that is stopped and searched, especially when they have nothing on them and they just happen to be at that particular time. So that's something to always bear in mind. Nonetheless, I would not want to see our officers being reluctant to do a stop and search, and I've stopped and searched people as a special constable myself, and they were positive stop and searches. So I wouldn't want any officers to be backward in coming forward and carrying out a stop and search, as long as it's done properly, lawfully, and with an element of understanding of the impact of what they do, what they're doing will have on members of the public. Because the reality is that we've got criminal people, really bad people in our communities who carry knives, who carry dangerous weapons, and they do not have any signal on their forehead saying, hi officers, I've got a knife down my trousers, come and search me. So what's the alternative? Apart from having an intelligence-led approach to dealing with this?
Festus, you are the only ethnic minority police and crime commissioner in I think it's 38 now, police and crime commissioners, and then there's, and there is some suggestion that stop and searches are driven by the ethnicity, or linked to the ethnicity of the individual that the police are stopping and searching. Your feeling is that those stop searches still need to proceed, irrespective of the ethnicity of the individual being stopped?
Oh yeah, I mean, for me, any day, as a parent of teenagers, as a parent of black children, as a parent, period, the safety of residents, the safety of my community is the #1 priority for me. Yes, I want things to be done lawfully, I want things to be done properly, and I want things to be done effectively. And where mistakes are made, I want policing to openly accept that we got things wrong and learn and keep learning. But I don't think we're ever going to be at a stage in policing where we can say, right, we've learned that lesson and it's never, ever, ever, ever going to happen again, because given the volume of people you deal with, it's inevitable, I would imagine, that things will sometimes go wrong. But we have got to minimize the likelihood of that happening, #1. Secondly, ensure that we are learning from those. And thirdly, make sure that we keep taking people along that journey of what we are trying to do, which is ultimately to keep residents safe.
I don't know the statistics for Bedfordshire, but certainly from what's appeared in the national media, it appears that the death rate, the death through violence amongst ethnic minority community, particularly black men, is particularly high. Now, if, as I assume, that's the same in Bedfordshire, you have an opportunity there through your work with the Chief Constable, and with him having responsibility for the force, you having oversight for the force, to make a real impact in that really very sad, very shocking set of statistics where your risk as a black male teenager of death through violence is, I believe, significantly higher than it would be for your white male teenager.
The latest figure that I saw in 2018, 2019 in London, was that a black person was 3 to 4 times more likely to be a victim of a homicide in London compared to a white person. If we look at almost any public health incident where there was that level of disproportionality, there will be an outcry. So there wasn't rightly an outcry about the impacts of COVID on the ethnic minority communities, where you saw a disproportionality in terms of the ratio of deaths within the black community to the white community when it comes to COVID infection rates. And quite rightly, there was a public outcry on this, and that called on the government to do something and start looking at doing something about that. And I think we've got to have the same thing here. Yes, we need to talk about the disproportionality in terms of the use of force and so on and so forth, and we are dealing with that, for example, in my force in Bedfordshire. But we also have to look at the fact, in terms of the number of young black Asian men in our county who are disproportionately being victims of stabbings and who are also committing stabbing offences as well. But in the grand scheme of things, I think it would be a big mistake if we racialize this too much and conflate race and violence or race and crime. If you do that too much, because the reality is, if you go to some parts of the country, the preponderant amount of people who are being stabbed or being killed are white. It's kind of a representation of the demographics of the local area. So what I want to do is to tackle this issue wherever it is from, whether it's in the black community, the Asian community, the white community, take the guns and the knives out of the hands of our people, but more importantly, tackle the causes of these. Because unless we deal with the root causes of this, which is, for example, a huge amount of bullying on our streets and on the school playgrounds, that then pushes people into gangs, unless we're dealing with serious issues in homes, where a lot of our young people are witnessing domestic abuse and violence in their homes, unless we're dealing with the root causes of these, just dealing with the symptoms is just not going to be enough.
Which brings us then on to the wider topic of young offenders, whatever their ethnicity, whatever their gender, whatever their background. And in your remarks there, you touched on some of the potential causes or the potential contributors to individuals becoming offenders at an early age, whether it's their experience of domestic violence between their parents or others, whether it's bullying at schools and others. So the suggestion there is that I wouldn't dream of putting words in your mouth, of course, but would the suggestion there be that young offenders are, dare I say, victims of their own background and experiences earlier in their life? And if that is a contribution, how are you going to solve that? How are you going to get upstream of the problem and start fixing that for those young offenders, potential young offenders of the future as well?
It is a very big challenge, but I think identifying, and separating causes and outcomes are very, very important starting points in my view. And that is one thing that we're taking, that's an approach we're taking in Bedfordshire, for example, through the Violence and Exploitation Reduction Unit that we've got here, which is doing a marvelous job, in my view, in helping to keep our younger people safe. One thing that I'm also doing as a Police and Crime Commissioner is commissioning a service that would actually provide a lot more support to parents and guardians of young people. I see a lot of the interventions that we've got at the moment targeting young people directly, and that's important. So youngsters we've got ex-offenders, we've got people with lived experience and experts going into schools quite rightly engaging with young people, warning them of the dangers of being involved in crime, informing them. And I go into schools myself as a PCC, saying to people, look, I grew up in a rough environment in East London where I saw, I had a gun pulled at me, in Brixton once, I had a knife pulled at me in Wood Green once. I've seen people, chased down the streets with a machete. A young boy that I knew, was beaten to death with a chain in Silvertown in London. So I have that. I've had friends who've been to prison, but I can say to a lot of the youngsters in the schools, quite rightly, that look, despite all of these, look at where I am now. You do not have to make those choices because there are consequences for doing that. So whilst that is important, one thing that I want to do as a Police and Crime Commissioner is to provide a lot more support for parents and guardians, because my experience and what I've gathered from the last couple of about a year and a half or so campaigning is that many parents genuinely are trying their best. Raising kids is not easy, but now in the world of the internet, and you've got so much more amplified peer pressure around you, I think there are a lot of parents who struggle and they have no idea where to turn to when they start to see troubling signs. So do I go to the police? Well, I don't want to do that because I don't want a police car in front of my house. Do I go to social services? Well, I don't want to do that because I don't want to become a troubled family. And then I go on their radar and then they start, checking on you, whatever the myth might be about social service intervention. So what is the middle ground? So one thing that we're looking to, what we're going to start doing, we will be doing in Bedfordshire, is providing that middle ground, that safe landing spot for parents and guardians who have got concerns, who are struggling, and then signpost them to support services that might be available to them.
So that suggests what certainly in the States is referred to as defund the police, which is not, in my view, a very good slogan. It's the wrong slogan.
Yes.
But it suggests monies being made available upstream to in diversion and support for example, youngsters.
Yes.
Which the slogan defund the police, of course, implies removing monies from some of the other activities. So how do you square that circle?
Whoever came up with that phrase they need to go back and apologize and find something else to use it. I mean, in fact, what we're actually seeing is more funding now going into policing in Bedfordshire and nationally. Actually, in our force, our budget is going to be about £130 million this financial year when you remove the special grants as well. And before, in 2015, our budget was £100 million.
Okay,
so we've got more money going into Bedfordshire Police now than ever before at any time in the past. But at the same time, additionally and separate to that core funding, we've got early money coming in through the VRU, the Violence Reduction Unit. We've got money coming in for police and crime commissions to commission services. So these are additional monies that is not actually taking anything away from the core frontline policing budget.
So again, for international viewers, there is a local tax here in Bedfordshire, for example, and in other counties, in other forces, that effectively collects a precept. It's an amount of money.
Yeah.
On top of that, there is a national government grant, and on top of that, there is occasional special grants, such as come from, for example, the Violence Reduction Unit and others. And I think you've been quite successful just recently in attracting some of that funding. Yes,
our force, we just announced yesterday the receipt of about £7.1 million as a special grant from the government, and that money is going to be designed to help us in tackling the serious issue we have in Bedfordshire, sadly, around serious organised crime gangs. We are number 4 in the nation when it comes to our exposure to the importing and exporting of county lines behind London, Greater Manchester and the West Mid.
So county lines...
a small county like ours, with a small county budget, we have got major metro problems like county lines, and it's a big issue in our area.
So county lines refers to the practice of drugs being supplied from typically the big cities through to the outlying, generally more rural areas, but actually Bedfordshire is a mix of urban and rural, and very often county lines, those supply lines with youngsters, teenagers, actually doing the drugs running from A to B.
Right.
And there's
basically those kids are being used. They're being used as traffickers of drugs. But what we've now become as a county is that we, rather than becoming an importer of these drugs lines, we're now an exporter of it as well.
Well, that was one of the things that you mentioned in your election statement. So quite a short statement, only a few hundred words, that sets out for the voters here in Bedfordshire of what you intended to do. And you said, and I'll paraphrase rather than use your full sentence, but in effect you said that you, with Gary Forsyth, the Chief Constable, and his team of Bedfordshire police officers, staff, specials and others, that you would tackle drug dealing.
Yes.
So how can Bedfordshire, a small county, tackle the substantial, not just national, but the international challenge that drug dealing represents?
Well, one of the things that you've got to do, if you're going to be dealing with drug dealing, you've got to deal with the drug taking. Okay, so one of the things that we are doing with initiating something called the Next Steps program, which is going to be helping people to come off drugs. I mean, you see a lot of people who are, unfortunately, who are addicted to drugs. For example, in our county, Home Office funded research, I think about in 2019, found that about 34,000 people in Bedfordshire, a small county again, admitted to using drugs, using cannabis and crack cocaine. And this amounted to about £113 million, which happened to be our police budget that same year as well. So you can see the significant number of people who are using drugs. And obviously when you've got users, you've got suppliers. You can't have the supply without a demand, you can't have the demand without a supply. So we want to try and tackle it from both ends, both the supply and the demand. So that's one thing. Secondly, we are investing, of course, in tackling the gangs, the drug dealers in our county. So one of the successes we've had in the last 15 months or so, through the Phonetic, which was Phonetic. Phonetic.
Yep.
That is
it's Operation Phonetic.
Operation Phonetic, that's correct. Where you had, I think it was the Dutch and the French authorities, they were able to hack into the EncroChat phone system,
yes,
which is used globally by organized crime gangs. And we got our data from that operation, and it turned out that 10% of all the firearms that was recovered nationally through this operation were recovered from Bedfordshire. Almost £1 million were seized. Several amounts of Class A drugs were seized at that process, and quite a number of people were arrested and prosecuted as well. So we're tackling this from both ends, both the high level rollers, as you call them, to the street dealers. But one thing I really want to do is to make sure that, as well as dealing with the enforcement, we're also dealing with the causes of these and the demand for the drugs, because you can't do just one without dealing with the other as well. There's
quite a challenge on you, the Police and Crime Commissioner for Bedfordshire, in that on the one hand you're dealing, or rather interacting with the victims and potential victims throughout the county.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, on the drug dealing side, with your Chief Constable, there is a need to tie in with the National Crime Agency, with international agencies, maybe Interpol, Europol and others. So I can completely see that the stakeholders that you're liaising with, a very, very long list indeed. Before your immediate Police and Crime Commissioner predecessor here in Bedfordshire had seen and had helped steer the force from an inadequate rating given by Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary, HMIC, through to a good rating. Can you make it an even better rating than good?
That is the plan.
How?
Is the plan. Well, one of the things that I want us to do is to make sure that the quality of service that residents are receiving is better. So for example, when people call our 999 or control room, basically the response time is better. So same thing if they call the non-emergency line, that the response time is better. I want to see that improve. So our force control room, I want to see that first contact point become much more improved than to where it is at the moment, and we are working on that already. I want to make sure that the experience of victims of crime in Bedfordshire is much better than it is at the moment. Even though it is good, I believe it can be better. So I'm working with our signpost team, our victim support team, our victim support team, that is improving as well. I am making sure as well that the level of early intervention, that the amount of effort that we're putting into preventing crime is improved as well. So overall, I think there's some areas that we can improve. There's some areas that we've done extremely well in over the last couple of years. But moving forward, to some of the areas that I think that we can really do better in and make some significant progress in as well.
So you're 2 weeks, no, hang on, 2 months. 2 months, I beg your pardon, into a job that the Bedfordshire electorate have voted you into for the next 3 years. Some of the activities there are 10-year schemes. You know, you'll be doing fantastically well if you've turned those round in 3 years.
I believe we can make some very good progress, and I think we are. But you know, from a management point of view, my thing is that very often it's the little things that make the biggest difference. And often it's very easy for those in public office or in leadership positions to think of, you know, big grand schemes. And I just believe that sometimes it's the little things that make the biggest difference. So for example, I make an effort to walk around our stations every week and talk with the officers. And you know, for some people, well, don't you have enough to do on your time? Well, if I'm going to spend my lunchtime, you know, talking with the officers who might have had a very difficult shift the night before, where they've seen someone, you know, murdered or who has committed suicide, I can just have a chat with them, just say, you know what, thank you very much for everything that you did. You're back at work today, you know, well done, and thank you for that. Those kind of things make a big difference and they build up. So that's one of the reasons why, you know, I believe that we can be better at the retention of officers in our force. We are not the best in the country, but I really want to see us turn that around to becoming one of the best police forces in the retention of officers. And that means how are we looking after them, how are we supporting them privately and publicly, and how are we resourcing them, which is one of the reasons why I'm really keen on making sure that Bedfordshire Police gets its right level of funding, because the more officers we have effectively trained, effectively supported and effectively deployed, the less burden the other officers have to carry, because at the moment they're carrying far too much because the funding does not allow us to have the level of workforce that we need to adequately police our areas.
One of the things that we touched on right at the start, I mentioned to you, and apologies I hadn't mentioned it beforehand, that as part of this policing friendship tour that I'm doing and have been on now for the last 4 months or so, each person I speak to and record an interview with, I ask them about their relevant charity, and I will completely take responsibility for not giving you forewarning of that. And I'll also say that the charities that have so far been nominated and raised actually are quite a broad spectrum, ranging from charities that relate to officer support, relating to charities that the individuals feel deeply about through their own personal experience. With an apology that I didn't give you an opportunity to check the detail, but you mentioned a charity before we started recording. I have a thing for dogs, and police dogs, I think, are sometimes the unsung heroes in policing. Well, actually, that's a bit that they are loved. Our police dogs are pampered, very well pampered. But then there's a life after being a police dog, being a PD. So I will be supporting charities that provide care, love, support, and ongoing attention and pampering to our retired police dogs. We'll make sure that the details are available on the Policing Insight website of that very charity. Festus, it's been an absolute pleasure meeting you again. Again, thank you so much on a personal level for your support in my own challenges now many months ago. I'm going to conclude this, if I may, by just taking another look at the panorama that we have, and it is a glorious panorama. It's looking over Lidlington, the racetrack, I'm not sure, is that a
Millbrook?
Millbrook, is it? Yeah. Somewhere there you'll be able to see police headquarters if you look close enough. I'm not quite sure, but it's in that direction for Bedfordshire. Normally my guide are the police aerials. That's the quick tip to find police headquarters. That's over to Milton Keynes. Just behind us, a quick span round here, quick pan round here, a picnic area. As we came up this ridge line, there was a deer that bounded across our path, wasn't there?
Glorious,
it was just wonderful. I didn't have the camera running there, but Festus, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.
Huge pleasure. Thank you.